Welcome to Season 4 of the Balanced Voice podcast, powered by Crime Stoppers of Houston. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining us. We're really glad you're here. We are a podcast created by the people, for the people, and we have a mission to facilitate balanced conversations that offer real solutions about today's most pressing issues. I'm the executive producer, Sydney Zeiker, and today our host, Rania Mankarious, welcomes one of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein's victims, Teresa Helm. Teresa attended the recent trial of Ghislaine Maxwell and shared with us how it felt to sit in the same room as her.
I felt very strong in those moments. I felt like there I was on the freedom side of freedom, and she's on the other side of it. She doesn't get to be on my side. So I was certainly taking my power back in those moments of being eye to eye to her.
We are grateful for Teresa's willingness to share about her experience with Maxwell and Epstein, as well as her vision for a world without exploitation. We hope you enjoy this episode and share it with your friends. Without further ado, here's your host, Rania Mankarious.
Welcome to the Balanced Voice podcast. As always, we're thrilled to be talking to today's guest, Teresa Helm, a name many of you might be familiar with, especially if you've been following current events. Currently, Teresa works with an organization, One More Child, as a survivor, leader, mentor, speaker. She's an advocate, a mom of two amazing kids. Teresa, welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Teresa, we've been following your story and what's been going on, I think, as well as the rest of the country and maybe even the rest of the world. So let's give a little bit of a background. At age 22, you were an excited young massage therapy student that learned about a job opportunity with Ghislaine Maxwell to be an on-staff massage therapist. You flew out to her home and went for the interview. And what happened to you that day and in the moments that followed and the hours that followed really have struck a chord with the country and I think put you on your path to do what you are today. Bring us back to that day.
So that day began with me, getting myself ready to go to meet Ghislaine Maxwell for a job interview. And prior to that day, I spoke with a girl named Teresa Helm, who is the whole reason why I ended up with Ghislaine interviewing for her in the first place. However, again, to that day specifically, I walked myself to Ghislaine's home as I was given instructions to do so. And, I arrived and instantly I'm let in and I'm directed to go upstairs and wait for her. And it's very apparent, when you first arrive, how beautiful her home is. And really, it was just mind blowing to think that here I am, I'm 22 years old. I have big dreams, big aspirations. I am in massage therapy school, something that I, was very passionate about, helping others and healing and what I would consider the healing arts, and the opportunity of being able to travel the world, being someone's private massage therapist of this successful woman. I mean, yeah, it was a total dream come true in my eyes because traveling is something that I always loved and wanted to do. So the opportunity couldn't have been more perfect in my view. And, when I met Ghislaine, we had lots of great conversation. She was very polite and very kind to me, very well spoken. So again, it just really reiterated the fact that she was successful, clearly wealthy, and she was very kind and polite, which there was a certain ease that I was put at, being in her home and having her treat me the way that she was. And throughout our conversation, it's like every point that I would raise or she would ask me about my life, my background, and simple things like where I'm from Ohio. And then she would share a story about her connections with Ohio. I would share about my dad, and then she would share about her dad. I shared about my birthday being December 26th, and she shared about her birthday being December 25th. And we joked around about how we always said we're going to have it a different, month, like in the summertime or right away from, Christmas time. And so it's like every bit of information that I was sharing with her, she was coming back and making those emotional connections with me. And now I know, of course, that she was very specifically and very intentionally making those emotional connections with me as a means to groom me, and that is a really great example of what grooming is like. She set me at ease. She made me feel comfortable. And she, again, made those emotional connections with me. And I certainly consider her to be a master manipulator, because everything she did with her intention, it worked. And the end goal, one of the end goals, is to gain my trust. And that's what she did. She entirely gained my trust in those few hours that I spent at her home. And I didn't have any reason to believe that there was any danger on the horizon. I didn't believe that, I felt like everything was going so well. I gave her a massage, as I intended to be there for, to give her a massage and to interview to be a massage therapist. And, she fell asleep during the massage. That's a good sign as a massage therapist. She's relaxed. I gently woke her up at the end. She gets up. She excuses herself from the room. I excuse myself as well to the restroom. I see a photo of her and, ex-President Clinton on the wall. And it just really, again, all these compounding factors of success, and the way she was treating me was kind and polite. And I just felt like this is a woman that I want to be near. This is somebody I want to work for.
And as you say that, it's like her success and the access that she has. You see a picture of her with a former president, the friendship that she's sort of building with you, we have so much in common. As a young woman, that is very enticing. That's incredibly enticing. So I imagine being in your footsteps and feeling like, wow, I got very lucky to wind up on this interview today and have it go so well.
That's precisely how I felt. I felt like it was meant to be. I felt like this is the reason I moved from Ohio, moved to California, started at the school. I mean, I felt like I had come across the most wonderful position that I could ever come across in my shoes. Yes, that's what I believed.
But the second part of that interview, which you were not aware of, was actually going to Jeffrey Epstein's home.
That's right.
And if you feel comfortable, please share about that. And my biggest question was, when you walked in and there's video footage of the hallway leading to his office. And actually, I don't even know if that's real footage. It's as we do research and we're reading about your story, a lot of media outlets have covered your story, of course, and they show this sort of long wood paneled hallway that goes into this office. I, again, don't know if that's his, but did you feel uncomfortable or frightened in the onset, or was this just a continuation of a dream interview?
When I first learned from Ghislaine that I was going to be meeting with her partner, Jeffrey, again, I didn't know whatsoever that there was an additional person or part of the interview until she told me at the very end of my time with her. And once I arrived at Jeffrey's mansion, which she had told me it was because I had been earlier complimenting on her townhouse and how beautiful it was. And she said, well, if you really like mine, wait till you see Jeffrey's. It's the biggest on Manhattan Island. And so when I arrived to his home, I was let in and I waited in this office. And then I shortly after met him and the chef that was in the kitchen, because Jeffrey was actually finishing his dinner at that time. And no, there was nothing that I felt uncomfortable with at the start of it. I'm having a discussion with Jeffrey and his private chef, and things are going well. They're both very polite and charming and charismatic. We get to the point where I'm like, we're all joking around, and, it was just a nice, casual, cool conversation in the kitchen. And then it was when Jeffrey said, let's go back, go to my office. And I originally thought I was going back to the office I had been waiting in before I met him. But no, we went up the stairs to a different office. And it was just up the stairs. I don't necessarily recall like the wood paneling or whatever, but I certainly remember walking through the doorway of that office. It was a very, very, very tall door. And the room, of course, I remember a lot. It was a big office, big room, very tall ceilings, beautiful curtains. Yeah. So things, once I was in that room with him, is when things turned. That's when the abuse started, was in that room.
I can't imagine being 22, you're from the Midwest, you're just working on your career and wanting the best for yourself, to end up in this situation. And so many things are going through my mind as you're sharing the story. The first being that groomers come in every type of personality sort of you can imagine. So people might think, well, a groomer is going to be somebody you'll look at and you'll be afraid of initially, or there's going to be something that tells you this is a scary, not safe person. When you talk about Maxwell, and when you look at pictures of her, it's like she's not a Houston socialite, a New York socialite from, Europe, and living everybody's dream life. Interacting with the most powerful people in the world. She's everything that's good about what women can become. And yet it appears that she was a seasoned, calculated groomer. And I think that's a very important message for people to understand. And the second, I think, when you left her apartment and made your way over to Jeffrey's, how does she just go on with her day, knowing what you're about to encounter?
That's something that I've wondered for nearly 2 decades, and I'm not sure that I'll ever get an answer to that. I'd love to have a conversation with her, because I would if I had the opportunity.
Fascinating.
That's the $1 million question. How can she go on carrying out her day, her life, knowing what she put me through and so many other people through? I don't know the answer to that, because that to me is someone who clearly has a very unwell mind and unwell heart. And that's not something that I can and have any relation to. And the thing about groomers is precisely what you said. They're not scary necessarily to look at. You don't have an automatic inclination of who a groomer is, because if you do, they're already failing at grooming. Their deception is so deep that they have to be emotional. They have to establish those emotional connections. And again, it comes down to, they have to establish a trusting relationship with you where you automatically feel that they are somebody that's not going to put you in harm's way and that they are trustworthy. Without a successful grooming process, the abuse doesn't happen. So in a sense, I consider grooming like the gateway to abuse. And an additional, that's one very important successful outcome to grooming, is the opportunity to abuse, predators getting the opportunity to abuse. And then another very important component, I believe, about grooming is the predator shifts the guilt and the shame to the victim, because the victim then, in my instance, I left Ghislaine's home and I walked myself to a predator's home. I walked myself there. No one forced me to go there. I walked myself there on the basis of the trust that I had established that Ghislaine was sending me to a home of somebody that was safe. I didn't think whatsoever that I was in danger, or else I would not have gone. So what I mean by the shifting the shame, like I spent nearly 2 decades in a shame that was so overwhelming. It was paralyzing because I blamed myself, like I should have known somehow, because I took myself there. So it's exceptionally important to really understand the deep dynamics of grooming because, well, again, it's master manipulation.
Teresa, one of the things we talk about a lot, and I know you talk about as a survivor leader, is this question of young kids who end up walking out of their front doors and into the arms of a trafficker. Mm-hmm. And I've had many conversations with our Houston Police Department and other police departments across the country when a child goes missing. And the biggest question is, did the child run away and is in danger, or was the child lured away? That's the question I always pose. I said, well, did they run away willingly and with no one creating the scenario under which they ran, or were they lured away? And it's a very important distinction because traffickers who have made a young person their target, predators, traffickers, groomers, you put the whatever word you want to use, they spend their time masterfully getting that person to go where they need that person to go. So the victim is an unwilling participant and a complete innocent bystander of their fate at that point. And that's why it requires us as a community to jump on board in a very aggressive way and help, whether it's mitigating these opportunities or stepping in to make sure that the punishment is elevated or that the access is not there. Let me ask you about, you carry that guilt and that shame, and a lot of survivors of sexual assault do as well. How do you overcome that to get to the point of pressing charges, outcrying, pushing for justice, and especially in your case when you're dealing with very, very powerful people? I mean, it's standing ovations across the world for you and others like you.
My motivation for continuing to fight for myself and to what I would really consider to finally find a lot of worth in myself was when I was pregnant with my son. Mm-hmm. So becoming a mom changes everyone. And it changed me in the sense of the fact that, again, I really, for the first time, gained a sense of self-worth and self-value and self-love that I had not experienced, and that had also been literally ripped away from me, as I certainly felt like such an object. I was very objectified through these events in my life. And so, yeah, becoming a mom. And then, so once that journey began, as far as knowing that I wanted to be the best version that I could be for my child, to be the best mom. And that really catapulted me into the journey that I've been on with healing, and knowing that to be the best me and to be the best mom, I really had to dig deep and really start the healing process. And it is a journey, and it's not easy to come forward and be public about this, especially being a mom. And there was, I left Epstein's home threatened. He threatened me as I walked out the door of his home that day. And then I carried all of this story of what happened to me for a long time before I shared what happened to me, because of that shame factor. And I think, again, what really made me decide to come forward and go public and reach out to the FBI and things of that nature was when it all really came to light for me, when I actually saw who he was, when I gained the understanding of who they were, Ghislaine and Epstein. And sitting there in my car, back in 2019, it was it was in the middle of July or towards the end of July. And I had just finished my yoga practice, and I had recently found out like who they were, and I pieced it all together because for a long time I didn't know who they were. I didn't know that there were so many other girls. I didn't know that this was a worldwide network that they were conducting. And I knew that silence was no longer an option. And I was not going to suffer in silence any longer. And, silence it's not, to a victim, silence is not quiet. It's very, very loud. You internalize that. It's very, very loud. And I was like, this is it. I'm not silent about this anymore. And there's no turning back from that day.
When you came forward and shared what happened to you, was the response overwhelmingly positive, supportive from people in the community? Were there negative comments, and what was that like for you?
In my local community, there had been a story put out, and I did make the mistake, to be honest, of reading some of the comments. And I say mistake because I won't read comments any longer, because there were a few people that just don't know me at all, have never spoken a word to me in my life, saying some just off the wall negative comments. And the only thing I can really say to that is I'm sorry for what they may be experiencing, and I'm sorry that they find this as an outlet for that, whatever they're perhaps experiencing. Overall, there's been a resounding positive network of support worldwide. And that's something that really, of course, means so much to me and so much to all of us. And I know that there's been times where it gets scary. It gets scary sometimes, like this car's been following me too long, or why is this car in the neighborhood I don't recognize? Things can get scary and things can be overwhelming. And there's a lot of pressure a lot of times. And a lot of the times what has kept me going is the fact that I'm fighting for my children and their future and the future of all children. And the support from so many people has really, really helped in those times where it gets a bit overwhelming.
Well, thank God again for people like you who have the courage to stand up and do what you did. And, you look at some of the names that came out of the Epstein lawsuit, the whole ordeal. And I won't list them, but I mean, they're dignitaries, they're world leaders, they're major business tycoons, they're media icons, they're celebrities. This is a network. I mean, to be sexually assaulted in any way, shape, or form is unimaginable. It's unimaginable. And the imbalance of power and the self-doubt and the shame and all that's carried. But then to have that imbalance be such that you're dealing with this level of power on the other side is so unbelievable. And again, the fact that you've risen up and all the other women like you have risen up is going to be what changes the course of predatory behavior and trafficking, I think, moving forward. And of course, we're all watching the Ghislaine Maxwell case, and however it twists and turns, the end result will be that these issues can no longer just be pushed under the rug. I've been following, CNN producer John Griffin arrested allegedly for attempting to persuade minors to engage in sexual activity. And it's just an example to me of how pervasive this issue is. I mean, it's everywhere, and anyone with power can use it to manipulate any young person that's aspiring any type of greatness. Do you think we're getting ahead as a culture?
I do think we're making progress, yes, because, some years ago, this would not be a trial. We would not be at post-trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't believe that Jeffrey Epstein would have ever been arrested. Of course, he got away with it, nearly 20 years or 15 years ago. I do think times are changing, and I do think that a lot of the collective efforts are certainly making a difference. And you're absolutely right in the fact that, this is such an interconnected worldwide system that includes every power structure that there is, every single power structure there is. It's like it's all interconnected, and unfortunately, they're all using their power, to manipulate and harm others for their own perversion. And the thing about the power, though, is it's our power. They took my power, and I take it back. All of this power that they're leeching is our power. As long as we continue to stand strong and stand together and support one another, and if one's feeling weak, another one stands up. If another, and vice versa. As long as we continue down this path, I believe we will forever change the world.
You were at the Maxwell trial. You sat in and observed. How did it feel to be in there? And why do you think it wasn't as highly covered as maybe a case like this you would think normally would be?
Being there in the trial, I felt very angry for a good portion of it. Of course, I didn't know how I was going to feel until I was actually there. And I felt very, very angry. There was a part in the trial where Ghislaine and I were looking at each other eye to eye. We did not look away from one another for quite some time. And I felt very strong in those moments. I felt like there I was on the freedom side of freedom, and she's on the other side of it. She doesn't get to be on my side. So I was certainly taking my power back in those moments of being eye to eye to her. Why do I feel like it wasn't covered? That's a very, very great question. It seems like it should be somewhat of an outrage that it wasn't covered as it should have been. And to be perfectly honest, if I had to say, I would take the stance that because a lot of people, unfortunately, are in some way, shape, or form in cahoots with Ghislaine Maxwell, or manipulated or compromised in some form or fashion. And I believe that that's a case with a lot of these predators that seem to be tied and interconnected. They're all compromised through blackmail of one another, and it seems like they're all owned by someone else, and they have to continue to keep their band, they have to keep their club going and keep their, they have to try to stay together as well, so that they're not because we're coming for them, right? And if they're turning on one another, then it's going to make our job easier. We don't have an easy job. And I don't expect it to become really much easier, but we will keep going. I just believe that that's why it wasn't so highly publicized, is because she practiced. Who knows? I'm sure a lot of them are compromised in some way. It's very unfortunate.
The little black book of the list of names. You started, before I asked you about that, you were talking about, gaining our power and really uniting to put an end. The dream would be to put an end to this type of industry, the trafficking, the sexual assault, the sale of young kids, of anyone really. You think we're making progress. What do you want to see ultimately? We study a lot about the ease in which predators gain access to children online, but there are other forms in which this can happen. So what are you hoping to see as vital changes to end trafficking, or at least curb it?
Well, to the point of online specifically, it's outrageous what's happening online. As I'm sure you know, the numbers are at an all-time high as far as predatory behavior, time spent online. by kids has, more than doubled, which then allows for more time for predators to get in there and try to groom. So what I would like to see online is, and I know that there are some wonderful organizations working towards this, policy change as far as, ending network distribution act, which allows law enforcement more time to address if a claim has been made, or the Earn It Act, so policy change hopefully will take a stronghold and allow for big tech not to have so much control, because a lot of trafficking is happening online. I feel like as a society, offline, in the community, I hope that everyone feels or gets to the point where they can really feel encouraged that they are absolutely enough to be able to make a difference. I feel like sometimes folks will feel like, well, who am I? I can't do anything. I can't make a change. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not qualified or something, but everyone's qualified to look out for another. And unfortunately, that's where we're at. We have to be on the lookout for things. And that quote, that statement of see something, say something couldn't be more true. And you know what? If you see something and you say something, and if it turns out not to be anything, well, you know what? Okay.
Teresa Helm, you are obviously an ambassador for good. Your strength is unparalleled. We thank you for lending your voice and your vision to this whole conversation, of course, to being on the podcast. Is there a place people should go to follow you and the work you're doing now?
Well, I really need a website, but I don't have one. I'm at Teresa J. Helm on Twitter. You can certainly follow me there. Maybe I'll give an update at some point as far as when there's a website that I have, but I don't have that just yet. And, again, I work alongside various organizations across the U.S., and I will continue doing that and speaking with them and advocating for them and their organizations and their efforts. And of course, sharing my story and trying to connect with other survivors and mentoring them, and hopefully showing others that path of healing and helping them to understand that it's definitely possible, and that we can certainly leverage our experience for a greater purpose. Leveraging the pain to purpose is very important, because it can save someone's life, So I won't stop fighting for my kids and for others and for myself, of course. And I appreciate the time here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the Balanced Voice podcast, and everybody else. We will see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Balanced Conversation. You can find real solutions and tangible resources in our show notes at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast and on Twitter at @BalancedVoice_. Stay up to date on Rania's work by following her at The Rania Report, and we can't wait to see you next week for another Balanced Conversation.